Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori Amin, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us. Hi, Nandini. Welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Nandini Bajpai, and I'm the author of A Match Made in Mendi, which is a young adult contemporary novel. It came out in 2019. And my new book, Sister of the Bollywood Bride, is coming out on 25th of May. And it is also a young adult contemporary novel. I've had a few other books published in India that have been in the middle grade and the young adult area. I grew up in India and went to school and college there. And then I moved to Australia. And half my family lives in Australia. And then I moved here when I met my husband, who's from the Boston area. And I've lived in the Boston area now for over 20 years. So that's me.
Oh my gosh, you had a worldly life. I love this. What part of Australia is your family from?
So I lived in Melbourne most of the time I was there, but most of my family has since moved to Brisbane. So I go visit every year, every other year. Now, of course, no one can go, but most of my family is in Brisbane now.
Oh, that's so nice. And what part of India is your family? Or where did you grow up with?
So I grew up in Delhi, New Delhi. So my family is Rajput. We are from the state of Rajasthan, and but my father was in the Indian military, so we traveled all over the country, and but my schooling was all in Delhi, so I'm a Delhiite.
I love this. Yeah, I wanted to go to. There's a lot of places I want to travel. India and Australia are two of those places I want to travel to. They're on my list, and hopefully in a few years that could be a possibility. So. And I'll be asking you for suggestions.
Yeah, no, definitely ask away. I'm happy to share it.
I love this. So let's chat about you write YA books. You have written middle grade YA, and so were you a reader of that age group, or what brought you to write YA books?
Well, I loved reading all kinds of genres when I was growing up, and there wasn't that much YA available in India, but I did read historical novels that were, I don't know if you can call Jane Austen historical, but it was about young girls, right? So I didn't read much YA until I moved to the US, and I really enjoyed it. But when I first started writing, I was writing middle grade, and I was writing a fantasy and historicals, not contemporary YA. And how I got into it was Scholastic India had asked me to submit some YA manuscripts, and I sent them my historicals, and they're like, no, we need a contemporary story. So I sent them 5 chapters of the book that would become my debut novel, and they really loved it, and they bought it on a partial, and that's how I ended up writing contemporary. And once I started, I really enjoyed it.
What was the process of transitioning from writing in India, Scholastic India, to writing in the US? Which I know the publishing process is completely different.
Yeah.
There's agents, there's others, there's a lot of gatekeepers.
So when I started writing, I did get an agent here for a young adult historical that I had finished writing, and that was my book that I got an agent for here, and it went out on submission. Sadly, it didn't have much luck. This is before We Need Diverse Books. We were submitting it out in 2012, and there weren't a lot of takers. But then it got interest in India directly. So you don't need agents when you're submitting to publishers in India. So I could go to them directly, and they picked it up, and they loved it, and they published that book and another book and another book. And then I started getting interest back in the US because We Need Diverse Books, happened in 2014. I'd published 2 of my books in India in 2013, so a year before We Need Diverse Books. So it's just the timing. If I had waited, maybe they would have been picked up here. But at the time, I didn't have an agent, and I ended up publishing my first book in the US with a book packager.
Mm.
And I still didn't have an agent until last year. So I've been through every roadblock you can possibly imagine in the publishing process. I didn't have the rights back to this book because had it published in India. I had to wait to get it back, and then my editor here bought it. So it was great. In the end, it ended up being fine, but it was a journey.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I can imagine. I think I talk to authors about the journey and it's like it's not linear. It's not like this like everything falls into place. It's like there's roadblocks, there's challenges, there's pivots, there's different places, there's
Yeah.
different opportunities, there's things that you have to wait, there's plenty of writing that happens.
Yeah. But if you're writing and you're running into problems, just know you're not the only person. It happens to literally everyone. It's not a reflection on the quality of your writing. It's not a reflection on where you can be. And, persistence, I guess, is the name of the game.
I love this. And what do you love about writing YA? Like, is it the first times or like what's inspiring, the whole trying to figure out who you are, the identity, your
All of that.
family?
All of that is so, it's such a wonderful age group to write for, because people are finding themselves, people are at the very threshold of the rest of their life, and everything just feels so raw and real. And it's a very interesting age group to write for. And also, as a reader, when young people are reading, when you read at that age, things just it just makes a impact on you. So when I was reading when I was a teenager, I remember those books so clearly in my mind, that things that I've read later on in life don't have that same impact. So it's a really good age group to be writing for, and especially when you're writing about a culture that, most of my readers are new to. It's really nice to introduce them to, that world that they don't know, and then, they'll have it for the rest of their life. They'll have that connection. They'll feel that empathy with these characters that come from a background that may not be like theirs.
And so, what has been the process of writing during the pandemic? Has it been any easier, any harder? Has it been challenging, or just been productive, or just a little
It's
bit?
no, none of those things, because you know what it's been like. It's just such a weird time. None of us could have imagined it. If we had written this into a book, people would say this is not realistic. It's like dystopia. But so all I think everybody's timelines, if you had a book under contract or editing, everything got changed around, the timeline shifted, and all of us had to deal with being in lockdown in a house, and no one's leaving. Like, for a writer, you need solitude, you need quiet time, you need to be able to stare at a wall and just daydream. And you can't do that when you have conference calls in every room in the house. My husband's got conference calls, my kids are having classes online, everybody is talking at the same time. So it was harder to write. Honestly, it was harder to write. But when I had deadlines, I had to push through. And so you do go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I think that's like it's challenging. It can be you just have to get through it. Like I think it's like be tunnel vision when you have to, like
Yeah.
read block sometimes and just get it done and just like trust that it's gonna work itself out and like, and then going back to the real world, like, the
Yeah.
distractions, the people, the stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I literally used to have to wake up before everyone else just to get a little bit of quiet time, so that
Yeah.
you can hear yourself think. Otherwise, it's.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the daydreaming is the one thing that I miss the most. Like, for some reason, I was like, I think this past year, I've been like in a weird state of anxiety that is just like, it just keeps going and going and going, and everything's so dire. And I'm like, I don't like the wishfulness of like, what would happen? A daydream, like, like a story. Like,
That is so true. That is exactly true. You need to be in this place of being safe and happy, and having the ability to luxury to think about and imagine stuff. And when you're so worried in what's happening around you, it's hard.
yeah. So Oh, okay. Well, let's change topic. Let's talk about something good. Let's talk about Sister of the Bollywood Bride. So tell us the elevator pitch.
Okay, so Sister of the Bollywood Bride is about Minnie Kapoor, and she's a teenager. It's basically about a kid, a teenager trying to plan a big fat Indian wedding. And you know what? It is a huge project for somebody who's experienced, event planners, wedding planners to undertake. And you're talking about a 17-year-old who's, between in her summer vacation between junior and senior year trying to pull this thing off. But I love writing this book. I love writing this character because Minnie really loves her sister, and they lost their mom a few years ago. And there's nobody else to help her sister have this wonderful wedding that the mom would definitely had planned had she been alive. And when you're an immigrant and you lose a parent, you lose your connection to a lot of culture, and you lose your connection to the way life events would have been planned in your family, because they are your connection back to your heritage and your culture and all of that. And this kid ends up figuring it all out on her own. And people think it's not possible for someone to do that, but I've seen kids who can pull off all kinds of things, and she does. So it's about a teenager planning a big wedding and just trying to come to terms with the grief and of having lost her mother a while ago, which she hadn't processed fully yet, and just bring a whole community together around her sister.
So let's talk wedding planning. What was your research process like to get the wedding planning part?
So, I didn't have to do any research because this scenario actually happened in our family. So in 2011, Hurricane Irene hit Boston. We don't get a lot of hurricanes. We are not Florida. We don't get them,
Yeah.
So when you're watching the news and this thing is coming up the coast, you're like, yeah, it's going to get to like, I don't know, Pennsylvania and stop or something, But this thing just kept coming, and it was my sister-in-law's wedding. And it actually was predicted to land in Boston and really create havoc. And she was having an outdoor wedding and it got canceled. And we actually had to, somehow had completely replan the wedding with a day's notice. So all of that research was there. And while it was happening, I was like, oh my God, this needs to be in a book. This needs to be in a book. Like somebody has to write this thing, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I should do it. I just did it.
I love this. I love the real life inspires you, the book. And just like put a 17-year-old to do it.
Yeah, I know. Because I'm like, I know what to do, but what if it was my daughter who was really young at the time? I'm like, what if I wasn't there? How would she plan it? And I'm like, oh, she'd be fine. She'd figure it out. People would help, and that's what ends up happening in the book is, she gets help from people, and everybody just sort of gathers and carries her through it.
I love this. And let's chat about Match Made in Mendy. Mendy, is there okay? Tell us all about it, because actually it's on my TBR, so I wouldn't know from your experience. Like,
so Match Made in Mendy is about Simran Sangha, who's she's growing up in New Jersey. She's a teenager, and she comes from a long line of Indian matchmakers. So her mother and her grandmother and her aunts and all the women in her family going back a few generations have been matchmakers. So, and she kind of has that skill. She has that talent to see when people are right for each other, but she doesn't want to get pushed into the family business. She has her own interests, art and all this other stuff that she wants to figure out. But she and her best friend decide to take the knowledge and the know-how, and they have this book about matchmaking that was handed down in the family, all the techniques and tips in that book, and turn it into an app. And that's what they do. So they make this app called Matched, and it goes viral in her high school. And it sets people up, it connects people who you would normally not have thought are right for each other, and it creates total chaos. And so that's where the book goes.
Oh my gosh, I have to add this. Like, you have me at app, teenagers creating an app, and there's like a you're sort of like entrepreneurial, like teenagers who are like figuring it out. Like that's kind of like your brand. Like they're like they have big projects, they have big dreams, they're like,
Yeah.
make this work.
Yeah. I have faith in young people, actually, honestly. Some of them
Yeah,
are amazing. Yeah.
they do. So what are you working next?
So I have a couple of projects I'm working on next, and one of them is a YA contemporary, and it's also set in the Boston area, and it has more to do with dance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about somebody whose mother owns a dance school, and it's really huge. Classical dance with Indian teens is huge. So that's one, and the other one is fantasy, which is inspired by Indian mythology and history. And that's kind of been on the back burner for me for a very long time, and I really want to dive into it and work on it as soon as I have some free time after this pandemic is over, hopefully, and people go back and stop having conference calls in every corner of the house. So.
Yes. Oh, I can't wait. So I asked this question to others, just an opportunity for them to recommend books that they have read, books they can stop gushing about. And it can be any type of book. It doesn't have to be like within the genre.
Uh-huh.
So what would you recommend?
So I read this book, More Than Just a Pretty Face by Said Masood, and I loved it. It was awesome. I actually, gave it a blurb and everything. And another book I really like is Ray Bearer by Jordan Ifuko.
Ooh.
Yeah, and it has a sequel out now.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, these are books that I really loved, and a book that I'm hoping to read starting Tuesday
Yeah.
is The Marvelous Mirza Girls by Shiva Kareem. She was my
Mhm.
co-organizer for Books for Hope, and she has a launch on Tuesday,
Oh my
and
god.
I'm dying to read it. So
Oh my god. And you're launching on the 25th. So
yes, yes.
you're like
We have done nothing to promote our books. We've just been working on,
oh,
getting the fundraiser done.
oh my gosh, this is so exciting. So tell us where you can find you online.
You can find me on my website, which is nandinibajpai.com, and also on Twitter at Nandini Bajpai and on Instagram at NandiniRB. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Nandini, for being in the chat.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For book recommendations, author interview archives, and other fun book resources and tips, please visit WhatchReNextBlog.com. The Watch Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Network. To discover new shows to listen and love, please visit frolic.media/podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.